So far for my tiny home build here in Vermont, my partner Megan and I have leveled this gravel foundation and built these skids. This house was delivered as a bare bones kit with pre-cut lumber, and we've barely put a dent into that. But this week that changes when we build the floor. The first order of business you can see here is staining all of the plywood for the underside of that floor. Now, part of our goal for this build is to be kind of green and eco-friendly, so we wanted to avoid using any pressure-treated wood, but that did mean a lot of staining for this underside plywood. Now that we've got the plywood for the underside of the floor stained, it's time to start building out the actual floor sections. So while we do get lots of lumber with the kit, a lot of it is oversized or undersized or a little bit off, and especially for this floor, we wanted everything to be perfectly square and even so that the rest of our house would kind of go off of that. Since we're going to be living here year-round when it's finished, the floor needs to be insulated really well. And that becomes an issue when you can't access the underside of the floor when it's on those skids. So that's where the interesting design comes in, where the floor is actually built in different modular sections that are small enough they can be flipped and handled, but big enough that we only have to build 5 to put the floor together. Each floor section is going to be 4 feet by 20 feet, and there'll be 5 of them, with one of those sections being the front porch. So we end up with a 16 by 16 area for the inside floor.
Oh my gosh, that scared me.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Molly. Hi.
Once we had the rim joists in place for this first section, the next step was to install the blocking. This was to create cavities for our insulation, as well as to add some structural rigidity. Our main concern with this kind of funky modular setup was that if we were off by just a little in each section, that would compound when they're all put together and our whole floor would be off. So we spent a lot of time measuring and measuring again and checking square to make sure that it was close to the dimensions as possible. Up until this point, we'd been hand nailing everything. But after nailing those skids together last week and starting on these floor sections, we decided to bite the bullet and get a real nail gun. This thing was awesome.
Do it.
Once the sections were framed up, we went ahead and moved them onto the skids to get ready for the next part. Since these floor pieces will be holding insulation, the plans call for wrapping each of the pieces in Tyvek. So here we are on the underside of each section, going around and stapling that Tyvek on there. And now we can put that underside plywood on that we stained earlier.
Been out of that.
We'll be doing 4 of these sections total to make up the interior floor. Finish up the floor today. Get all these pieces finished up and join them together. Once we had all the Tyvek and plywood on the bottoms, we flipped each over so that we could cut and staple the Tyvek to the joists on the top. I got my parents' help to turn and lift these since it is green wood and these are quite heavy. And here the 4 floor sections are, all butted up against each other and in place. We always assumed someone would be injured during this project, and this time it was me. I rolled my ankle pretty good coming off of that deck, so I had to sit out for a few days while Megan and her parents helped put the insulation in. We decided to use rock wool for the insulation for this project, since it seemed like it'd be a lot nicer to work with than fiberglass. It's also hydrophobic and not prone to any mold growth, which is really important for our floor since we won't be able to get in there later. Once we had the insulation cut, it was just a matter of sliding the bats into the cavities in the floor. With all the insulation in, it's time to put on the top plywood. We did a dry fit first to make sure everything fit correctly before we screwed it all in. Before we screwed the plywood in place, we put this adhesive down on all the joists and blocking to secure it better and also hopefully prevent squeaking in the future. In the spirit of our somewhat green build is this adhesive that we're using. It's called Almighty Safe Coat adhesive, and it's supposed to be a bit greener and more eco-friendly than the average construction adhesive. And that's the interior floor done. Now we're on to the last part of this layer, which is the porch. It's the same size as the other modular sections, so it's 4 foot wide and 16 foot long. We had to add these pieces of plywood as spacers on top of the skids so that the top of the deck would sit at the same height as the top of the floor.
Don't count that.
Mika.
Not shown previously are the billions of other times we checked square on this thing, but I think it paid off in the end because we were about a 30-second off. Having a nail gun has made all the difference, so nailing this into the skids here took just a couple minutes versus a couple hours it would have taken with a hammer. And the final order of business is to put the deck boards on. To me, this was by far the most satisfying part of the floor build. Since it is a porch, we wanted to add a little gap between each board for rain, so we used these little red spacers to keep them all consistent. With those boards screwed in, the whole floor is done.
What do you think, Mika? Do you like it?
It's like, I don't know what you're all making a fuss about.
Next week, we put up our post and beam framing and go vertical, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.